Houston. And I've come down here to help my mom sell her house. And so I'm here for the next couple of days. And it's 5 a.m. My mom is asleep upstairs, and I fully expect that once I get to talking, that she's gonna come down those stairs, and she's gonna say, "Steve, who are you talking to? And what am I gonna tell her? and does she want to be on live TV this morning?" But good morning to you. I'm happy to visit with you each and every day. It's getting easier to come to this mental gym and work out a little bit and just free flow. I'm on a mission, saving humanity by keeping the vibration high, raising the vibration of humanity any old way I know how. And if you get a little tickle out of it, if it gives you a jolt and raises your vibration, hey, I'm blessed, If not, well, I'm blessed anyway, because I get to do it, and I get to raise my own, and I get to practice. It's all about practice. One of the things I've learned in this practice is that I'm not going to be able to completely free flow without preparation for very long. And now I've been at this. This is episode 24, actually 25, because I had an introduction episode. So this is number 25 that I've done that. This is a 25th hour that I've been talking to whoever tunes in and will listen. And what I've learned is that I've got to plan and prepare for this dream. If I want to be some kind of a broadcaster, I actually have to do more work to get prepared and my nature is to just sort of spill it out there any way it comes to me. But I'm learning that, I typically what I've been doing is waking up about 3:30 or 4 in the morning, and I ponder over whatever I've read the night before or the conversation I've had, or I look around the room, and then I spend 30 minutes or an hour sort of writing a few notes down. That's what I did this morning. It seems to work, and I like the way that I flow out intuitively, but I'm thinking as I go forward, if I want to keep doing this day after day after day and doing it better and better with practice and practice on this craft, wherever it's leading, then I'm going to have to get a little bit more organized. I'm going to have to bring order into this chaos and a balance of the left and right brain. I'm going to have to do that in order to get better, or otherwise, I'll be telling the same stories over and over, which is, you can take a story of any kind and you can, mold it into different stories, different messages. A good pastor does that every week. And so today I woke up at 4:15, which was not very long ago, and I scrambled. I wasn't even sure I was going to do this. I'm at my mom's house. I'm in a different place, and so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do or if I was going to do this at all. But I was determined to turn this thing on and keep talking and keep my commitment, my daily commitment, and keep practice. I was at the gym. I was actually at the gym about 3 or 4 days ago, and it's over at Shriner University where I go and use the gymnasium there, and there's a sign on the wall that says, "Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect." I like that. Yeah, practicing all the time. When you have a dream, and the title of this thing is "Slugging Through the Mud of Your Dream," and slogging through the mud of your dream. And when you have a dream and you have this vision in your mind, and you can't go there without a vision. You can't. But when you get onto the scent of this vision that you have, you can taste it and feel it. Most often it doesn't just fall in your lap. You can't just do something one day. You can't dream about being a big strong person and go to the gym once and say, okay, I did it. It requires often slow, deliberate slogging day after day after day. I mean, the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger is amazing. He had this dream to win the Mr. Universe contest or whatever it was, and then a dream to be an actor, and he just slogged and worked every day, hours in the gym every day, and you got to do that, but it gets tiring, it gets long, and you begin to wonder, you begin to doubt, how am I going to accomplish this great thing that's in my mind? How am I going to get to do this? I remember this movie. There's a movie called Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And it's about this Los Angeles Rams football player who dreams about playing in the Super Bowl, and he gets killed, and he goes into this other guy's body. And I won't go into all that, but this reporter, at the first of the movie, this reporter's asking him, okay, well, how do you think the Rams are going to do this season? And Warren says, well, I think we're going to go to the Super Bowl, and I think we're going to win. And he goes, yeah, I know, but off the record. And he goes, off the record? He goes, I think we're going to go to the Super Bowl, and I think we're going to win. And that is a good attitude. That is a winning attitude. And there's a lot to be said for a winning attitude. It gets you through the hard times. It helps you envision and continually drive forward towards something you believe is going to happen. And whether or not it does happen is another matter. But the fact that you believe it's going to happen, and that every day you think it's going to happen, and you drive towards that, it's what keeps you going. It keeps you going through the long, hard practice. And that's what I'm doing here. I mean, believe me, there are oftentimes, as I've said every day almost that I've turned this thing on, that I don't want to come here. I do not want to come here and turn this thing on and think of something to say. But I do, because it's good for me. And as I do it more and more, I'm feeling a little better about it. And I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable that, I do actually have something to say, that this thing may happen. And it leads me into this quote from Winston Churchill. And Winston says, never give up on something that you can't go a day without thinking about. Never give up on something that you can't go a day without thinking about. And that really is kind of my litmus test for a vision, a true vision. And what I mean by that is, over the years, I've had visions of different things, and some are sort of the real McCoy that I'm willing to do the practice for. I'm willing to plan and prepare and take steps toward every day, and those are the ones that work out. The vision becomes real. I had a vision to live on a tropical island, and went to work in the Galapagos. And I had a vision to take my family to Latin America somehow. There was no way I could have done that. And became a missionary and took my family, lived in Peru for 4 years. I was actually working in that arena for about 6 years, down in Peru and also in Cuba. And I got to expose my daughters to not only to sharing the love of Christ with lots of people, but living in Latin America and learning to speak Spanish and understanding what that culture was. I thought about living in Asia and working in China, and I had this big vision that came true. But I guess what I mean to say about this litmus test for a vision is, when I think of a vision, when I have this big vision and I get all excited about it, that may pass, all right? But my litmus test is day after day, week after week, month after month, whenever I think of that vision, if I get all excited about it every time, that's a pretty good indicator that it's real, and that I should keep slogging through the mud of that dream, working on it, practicing on it, whatever it takes. I have a vision about broadcasting. I think more people should do it. I think everybody has a story. It's just you know, are you willing to tell it? Everybody's got a book in them. Everybody's got a movie in them. Everybody's got some daily, blog, vlog, whatever you want to call it, some story that they can tell every day that's inspiring or educational or humorous. And anyway, I I love underdog stories. I love the underdog. The underdog is someone who's the most unlikely to succeed. The one whose chances are it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And one of my very favorite underdog stories is about a guy named Gavin MacLeod. And Gavin MacLeod, you got to be really old like me to understand who Gavin MacLeod was. Um, he found he was the captain of the Love Boat later in life. When he was 60 years old, he became there was a TV show, which you still have to be pretty old to remember. The Love Boat was a TV show that was very popular for a number of seasons, and the Captain Stubing, was this bald-headed guy that everybody loved, and his name was Gavin MacLeod. And I read an article in People magazine about him years ago, and it inspired me so much. Gavin MacLeod was early in life. He was a nobody extra on a TV show called McHale's Navy, and that's what I mean by you got to be pretty old to remember McHale's Navy. That was with an actor named Ernest Borgnine, and it's about some misfit sailors in the Navy, and it was a funny show back when I was a little kid. And Gavin MacLeod was one of the little extras, one of McHale's boys in the show, and he didn't really have much of a role. He was a very forgettable character, but Gavin. From that experience, that little experience being an actor, he dreamed about being an actor, and and he tried to get parts in different commercials and TV shows based on this experience with McHale's Navy, and for years he worked and worked to try to find his way into the movie business or the TV business or something. Everything he did failed. He slogged through the mud of that dream for years, but he kept after it, and he got so depressed at one point, he either tried to about it. I can't remember how the story went, but it was bad. He was in a very depressed state at some point, but he kept after it. He kept slogging through that mud. And the next thing you know, he gets this role, and overnight, almost, he is an internationally famous figure. He's making millions of dollars. He's got a beautiful wife, and he's got a show that he absolutely loves going to work and doing. And that's really the kicker, isn't it? Is the people that wake up in the morning and they are thrilled that they get to go and do whatever they get to do. They have found that thing that they fit right in. They found their place in the universe. And I just got so tickled over that article with Gavin MacLeod because I remembered him as that extra on McHale's Navy. And the comment that Gavin MacLeod made when they interviewed him for People magazine was, never give up. It can happen at any time, and that those are words of wisdom. My grandfather is a very good example of that, and my grandfather has a very interesting story. Especially if you're a sports fan, and in particular a baseball fan. My grandfather, Eddie Dyer Sr., was a baseball player back in the 20s, and his dream was to play baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was from here actually he was from Morgan City, Louisiana. Came from the swamps. All right, that's where my people come from, baby. We're coon-ass people. All right, at least from that side of the family. I mean, deep in the swamps. If you ever been to Morgan City, it is on the edge of Lake Palour. I did some oil exploration work over there and found out where I come from. And I mean, there are people that live back in those swamps that don't own a car. They own a little skiff with a motor on it. They hunt nutria and they trap nutria and they fish for alligator gar and they eat things like boudin. And that's where my grandfather came from. And he went to Rice University, and he didn't finish there. He started playing for the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was a pitcher back in the 20s, and he pitched for 2 seasons. And his dream in life, his pinnacle of human existence was being the star pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. And he was well on the way to getting that as a young guy. Quit college and went to play for the Cardinals for 2 seasons back in, I think, 1927 and 28. And things were going really good until 1929, when he hurt his arm. He was a southpaw pitcher, left-handed pitcher, and he hurt his arm and couldn't pitch anymore. And so he basically lost his job from an injury. And then in 1929, he had saved some money, put it in the stock market, right? And so that was going to and he was newly married, and lost all his money in the crash of 29. The Great Depression started, lost every nickel he had, and then he and my grandmother had their first child, which was my dad. All right, so 1929 was a bad year for my granddaddy. It was a triple crown bad year. All right, lost his job, lost all his money, and had a new baby and a new wife. And so he didn't know what he was going to do. I mean, he was like millions of people around the United States. My grandfather was devastated about this. And he was going to quit baseball and, go do something else. When they encouraged him, they saw that he had a talent for finding talent and finding ball players. The St. Louis Cardinals were not... they were not a rich team like the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox. They didn't have a lot of money. Back in the 20s and 30s, St. Louis was a podunk little place. They didn't have a lot of money for a ball team. So they had to develop their ball players. They had to create the farm team system, which my grandfather was very instrumental in doing. But it was behind the scenes. He was not the superstar pitcher on the mound in the big stadium. He was in the backfield running around to high schools and colleges and trying to find talent and bring them to spring training. All right, that was his job for the vast majority of his career, in the backfield. He was not on the front page of the paper. All right, and that's where he wanted to be. But he did whatever he could, and he kept that baseball dream alive by being part of it. And that's a good thing to remember. Is that if you have a certain vision to be in a certain kind of industry, let's say you want to be an astronaut. If I wanted to be an astronaut today, guess what? They're probably not sending me up on the space shuttle or to the Skylab. I'm probably not going into outer space. But if I really wanted to be in the space program, I could be in the space program in some capacity. I could work, making spacesuits, or working in as an administrator, or working for Boeing, or, being an engineer of some kind. I mean, if I wanted to be a professional golfer, at this point, if I wanted to be in the golfing industry, I'm probably not going to be on the tour with people like Tiger Woods, all right? It's probably not going to happen. But I could be in any capacity in broadcasting. I could be in clothes and golf shoes. I could be in all sorts of different capacities in that industry, and so that's an important thing to remember, is that when you have a vision and you start moving toward it, it may not work out exactly the way you had envisioned, but chances are it's going to work out better. And so to finish the story about my grandfather, his whole career, he worked in the backfield of professional baseball. He was in the shadows, helping develop ball players. Billy Graham is a perfect example. The preacher Billy Graham, he didn't originally aspire to be a preacher. He aspired to be a baseball player and to play for the St. Louis Cardinals. And my grandfather checked him out during spring training. And the famous line in our family is that he went up to Billy Graham and said, "Kid, you ain't got it. You need to find another line of work." All right. And so in Billy Graham's case, and in many cases, not getting the dream you want, and being redirected somewhere is a good thing. At the time, it may have been very disappointing to Billy Graham that my grandfather cut him from the roster. All right, but ultimately he found that place that made his heart sing and made a lot of other people's hearts sing too. You gotta love Billy Graham, but anyway, my grandfather went through that whole thing from about 1930 to about 1945 for about 15 years. And in 1945, I guess the war was over, and Granddaddy was going to quit baseball and come back to Houston and make some real money, because in baseball, it helped him survive the Great Depression. But ball players, even in high-profile ball players back then, they didn't make any money. They didn't make any money at all. And my granddaddy was going to quit in 1945, and they to get him to stay, they allowed him to be the manager. He had always wanted to be the manager of the Cardinal team, and they gave him a shot at being the manager for 1946. And in 1946, they won the World Series. It was my grandfather's rookie year as the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, and they won the whole enchilada. He went from being a nobody to being, internationally famous. I mean, all of a sudden, they have a Eddie Dyer Day here in Houston, Texas, and they give him the keys to the city in a big black sedan, and this party that they invited people from all over. You had, Bob Hope and Fred McMurray and, Jack Benny and all kinds of Hollywood stars. You had famous politicians, famous baseball people, and I pulled his picture down so you can see it. That there is my grandfather in the Cardinal uniform, and he's shaking hands with the manager of the Boston Red Sox, who they beat in the 1946 World Series, and all of a sudden, my grandfather was on the front page of papers throughout the known world, all right, and certainly in the United States of America. And all of a sudden, he broke through this ceiling after years and years of slogging through the mud of his dream. He wound up finding his place in the sun, and I suggest to you that is only possible if you continue to pursue. You must continue to pursue the dream, or it certainly won't happen. And was that farm team job? Was that the best job that he could ever made? Probably not. He could have gone into many other things and sold stuff and who knows what. But after the war was over, that's exactly what he was going to do, and that's World War II, mind you. And he continued on long enough for something big to happen, and something big did happen. I got this other picture here. I mean, this is how my grandfather was dressing back in 1946. I mean, wasn't he dapper? That's That's what the manager of the Cardinal team looked like in 1946, coming out of the locker room, and he went, and oftentimes, I'm reminded of this saying from Hondo Crouch, who started Lukenbach, Texas, who was my swim coach, and I've talked about him before, but Hondo is here in Texas. He's a famous figure, a famous country figure, and he was friends with Willie and Waylon and the boys, and Hondo used to say, everybody's somebody, all right? Everybody's somebody. And oftentimes we get to feeling like, I'm really nobody. You must remember to keep the vibration high. You are somebody. And when you're slogging through the mud of your dream, you need to remind yourself of that. And another thing, if you don't, and you begin to feel like you're nobody, all right, this is a problem, and it's got to be remedied, or bad things can happen. Yeah, you must keep your vibration high. And as I've said, pretty much every single episode here, a good meditation practice helps to keep you in more of a balance, not get stuck in that left brain logical, hardened pattern of thinking, that default mode of thinking. It's not good for you to be constantly in that part of your brain and not allow this right brain, intuitive, feminine part to come up. This balance through meditation, through yoga, through all manner of different things. Your prayer, your time with God, whatever it is. If it's church, then by all means, your tradition is important to you to relax yourself, and so keeping in mind that you are in fact somebody. Because if you don't, all sorts of stuff happens: drug and alcohol abuse, and depression, anxiety, and then the next thing you know, you're popping pills to try to manage your mental state. And a good example of what can happen, boys and girls, is a lady, I can't remember her name, but I believe she was an aspiring actress in the 20s or 30s in Hollywood. And I'll try to figure out her name, but she came to mind, and it's a famous Hollywood story about this young actress who she had a supporting role in a movie, and she did real good. She got some positive reviews, and it just sparked her interest, kind of like Gavin MacLeod. It sparked her interest in being an actress and being famous, and she had this passion for acting, and she was good at it. And but for I don't know how long, months, years, I don't know how long it was, but she couldn't get a part that she wanted. She couldn't find the right role. And she did auditions, and she went to acting classes, and she was trying every way she knew how to get into a movie, and she just couldn't. And after a while, she became very depressed and withdrawn, and she one day decided she was going to kill herself. So she climbed up on top of the Hollywood sign, the big sign there on the mountains above Hollywood, California. And she jumped off of that sign and killed herself. And later, when they were cleaning out her apartment, somebody looked in the mailbox, right? And they found an invitation to be in some major motion picture, all right, after she was dead. And so we never realize sometimes how close we are to some sort of a breakthrough. And we just we give up, and this is not good. I'm reminded of Admiral McCraven, who was the Navy SEAL admiral who became the chancellor of the University of Texas, and back in I don't know how many years ago, it must have been back in 2000 and I don't know, 2 or 3, 4, I can't remember. But he gave the most phenomenal motivational speech at the commencement at the University of Texas with all the graduates there. And many of you have probably seen it. It's a famous speech. It's a wonderful speech if you haven't seen it. It's Admiral McRaven's commencement speech. Just Google that. You'll find it. It's about 20 minutes long. Well worth watching. And he talks about the value of making your bed, and the value of recognizing the strength of other people, and the value of being innovative in what you're trying to accomplish, and the value of hope. That story of when they're all down in the mud during Hell Week and they start singing, and gets them through the night when they're in the mud, but the point is that the last point that Admiral McRaven makes is about don't ring the bell. In the middle of the yard, where everybody can see, is a big brass bell, and when you're going through Hell Week and when you're going through this grueling Navy SEAL basic training program, and these talented drill sergeants are using every trick in the book to get you out, to wash you out, to make you quit, to discourage you and work you, and every fiber in your physical and emotional and mental body, every fiber of your being is being challenged to the max. And all you have to do to get out of all those early morning workouts and all that harassment is just simply to ring that bell. Ring the bell and no more workouts. Ring the bell and you can sleep late, Ring the bell and it'll all be over. If you want to change the world, never ever ring that bell, all right? Never ring the bell. That lady in the Hollywood sign, she rang the bell. She was sick of it. She was tired of the harassment. She was not willing to continue to slog through the mud of her dream, and she rang the bell. She got out of it, and so never ever ring the bell. Willie Nelson is another example. Willie really didn't make it in music until he was 40 or so. He was, he tried, if you see pictures of Willie Nelson early on, his hair is all slicked back and he's got some shiny suit on. And over there in Nashville, I think he was on the Grand Ole Opry, or, he was almost like a Lawrence Welk looking character. And he didn't fit in. And that's a really good point to remember about Willie Nelson, is that he knew that music was his avenue, all right? But he did not fit in to this conservative, box. He didn't fit into the establishment box, all right? And this was very discouraging for him. He tried to do it the traditional way, and it did not work. And in Admiral McRaven's speech, one of his talks is about being innovative, how one of the recruits went through this obstacle course in his own special way, which was dangerous and risky, but he wound up breaking the record for the whole institution by doing it his way. And Willie Nelson was trying to do it the traditional way, and he was failing, all right? And so he wound up blowing that off and growing his hair long and doing it the outlaw way, all right? And if you recall, Waylon and Willie and Jerry Jeff Walker and Chris Christopherson, all those guys, they were the outlaw cowboys, all right? They were outlaw music, and they were. I remember a line from that movie Johnny Cash. I've talked about the one where he says, you can sing one song. If you was hit by a truck and you was laying out there in that gutter dying and you had a chance to sing one song, one song that would tell God how you felt about your time here on earth. One song that would sum you up. You telling me that's the song you would sing? That same old Jimmy Davis tune about your peace within and how it's real, how you're going to shout it? Or would you sing something different, something real, something you felt? Because I'm telling you right now, that's the kind of song that people want to hear. That's the kind of song that truly saves people. It's not about believing in God, Mr. Cash. It's about believing in yourself. And I love that line. I just love that line. What is your unique song? What is your unique art? What is your unique gift? And Johnny Cash, you recall, that wasn't the line I was thinking of in that movie. Johnny Cash was in front of these music executives, his producers, and he had these tapes. He had a vision to go in front of Folsom Prison, the inmates. He was going to go down and sing to the inmates. And this guy, Johnny Cash, had been involved in a lot of gospel music and conservative stuff, and sort of milquetoast type of music. But he wanted to do something radical, and so he went down and sang these songs at Folsom Prison. It was a huge breakthrough in his career. He basically told those producers, I'm going down. They told him not to go, and then they weren't going to play anything from Folsom Prison. He said, okay, well, I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to record these tunes, and you can listen to them if you want to, and if you don't like them, toss them. I don't care, but I'm going to follow my vision, my unique vision. And it was really, you remember that part in the movie, if you've seen it, he was all about this sort of traditional music. And then at some point, he was about to lose the opportunity, and he began to sing from the heart. He began to sing his own unique tune, right? I'm reminded just spontaneously, this is how it comes to me, folks. I was walking every day when I lived in Kingwood here in Houston. I would go walking and running through a park. And it was by Lake Houston up there, not far from the airport. And it was in this wooded area with lots of trees and wildlife. It's really beautiful up there. And I would hear the sounds of the forest early in the morning, and you would hear woodpeckers back there pecking on the wood. And there was this woodpecker that I started hearing this sound it sounded like a woodpecker tapping on wood through an amplifier. All right, that's what it sounded like. And you'd hear this bop, 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 and it was really loud. And I was fascinated by that. What was that? Where was that coming from? And you'd hear other normal woodpeckers tapping on wood, and then you would hear this sound. It was almost as if it was coming through a speaker. And I had to find out, after several days of hearing this, I had to find out what that was. And so I'd wait and listen for it. Every morning I would hear this. Every day that I went out running, I would hear this amplified woodpecker tapping sound. And so finally I listened for it. I started to listen for it, and I would hear it about sunrise every day. And so I followed it to this ball field. It was a vacant baseball field. In fact, it was the same field where I found that little charm of St. Michael shining in the grass there. But I followed it, and there was no wildlife in the baseball field. And, hey, Mom, you want to be on international television? No. It's my mom. No, Mom doesn't want to be on international television this morning. Good morning, Mom. Good morning. I look up at the stadium lights of this ball field. And up on top of one of those light poles is a woodpecker, and he's tapping on the aluminum cover of this big stadium light. And it's making this giant sound. It's just reverberating all over the forest. And I was like, that woodpecker is doing that on purpose. That is his unique call. He's discovered this thing. He is not... Typically, woodpeckers tap the wood to get insects out of the wood. But this woodpecker was standing on top of a light pole tapping on an aluminum thing. He knows that he's not going to get any food out of that. After a few times, you figure out there's no worms or insects inside that aluminum light cover. But he's tapping on this thing because it's the loudest. He likes it. It's got a vibration that he likes. And that's what he does every single day, right? It was the most amazing thing. And it told me, a little something about how nature is, each and every individual is unique in nature. And that was absolutely fascinating. And so anyway, that's my woodpecker story. I really was fascinated. I think everybody has this unique signature thing that they do, and kind of the trick in life is just to try to find out what it is. And anyway, I think let's see, it's about 5:40. I think I'm gonna cut it off early because I want to talk to my mom, and I just I love you. And the reason that I come and do this every day, in part, is for me, and in part is for you, whoever you are. I'm trying to find my unique signature call. All right, and practicing it is beginning to lead me to it. I'm going like in that that show that I mentioned the other day, the Finding Joe, the classic tale of the hero's journey. That's a wonderful little show. It's about I think about 40-50 minutes long, and you may not be able to find it free on YouTube. I've noticed on YouTube that a lot of the shows that I watch that have been taken by Gaia Television, and now you can't get them for free. You got to join Gaia. But things like that. There's another 4-part series called Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds, which I highly recommend. It's one of my favorite shows. And the Finding Joe, the classic tale of the hero's journey, is also one of those that's probably on Gaia TV now, and you may have to join it. But I highly recommend. And the guy talks about if you don't know who you are, what you're doing, go looking, go searching. And doesn't mean you got to quit your job or run off with the circus. All right. But what it does mean is that if you're drawn to this, if you want to pursue this dream, or to get a dream, to find a vision, go looking. Search yourself in your meditation every day. Find what it is that you really enjoy doing, and go do that. I think I mentioned Howard Thurman the other day, and it's don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And so find that which makes you come alive, and you'll find that passion, and you'll spring out of bed every day. And until you find that, kind of the payoff is that when you go to sleep at night, if you are on the trail, if you are on the scent of this dream, like a bloodhound trying to find an escaped prisoner, it's out there. That prisoner's out there running somewhere, and that bloodhound, sniffs it out and finds it. But pursue that feeling, that dream, and sooner or later, in the pursuit, it is in the pursuit where there's a tremendous amount of joy and the raising of your own vibration. Because in the pursuit, you may be working at some job you really don't like, all right? You may be in some, relationships you don't like. But you have a vision, a dream, and once you get onto the scent of that like a bloodhound, every night you get to go to sleep, and you get to say, I got a little closer. I did a little something. I read a book. I looked on the internet. I did some research. I met someone. I made a phone call. I did something. And that vision, which I've talked about before, if you put those pictures on the wall, whatever that vision, whenever you start to form that vision, how does that look in your mind? Start to look at images that reinforce that. And if I remember when I wanted to live on a tropical island, I had this vision way back when to live on a tropical island. And I used to go to travel agents Back then we didn't have the internet. You couldn't get all these images, just online. So I'd go to the travel agents and pretend like I was going on a trip somewhere, and I'd get all these brochures from them. And then I'd take them home and I'd cut out pictures that I really liked about tropical islands and sailboats and scuba diving and all that stuff. I pasted them on the wall, and I created a vision board back before I ever heard about what a vision board was. I would put them on the wall, and I'd look at those island pictures. I'd look at the island of Bora Bora. This was like the living end for me. Go live and work in Bora Bora or somewhere in Tahiti or Micronesia. And I'd look at that all the time, and I didn't know how I was going to live on a tropical island, but the breadcrumb trail began to form because I had the dream. And so I went to a travel agent one time to get some pictures, and she asked me some questions, and she said, well, you need to go talk to Judge so-and-so. I think his name was Judge Michael. I can't remember, so long ago. This back in the early 90s. And so I called this guy, and he has a house in Roatan, Honduras. And we go and have lunch there in Austin. He says, well, you need to talk to Mandy. Mandy runs Anthony's Key Resort. So I call up Mandy. I say, Mandy, I want to go to work for you tomorrow. I want to come down to Roatan. I want to work at your hotel. I can cook. I can, do maintenance on the buildings. I can drive the boat. I can do whatever you want, and she goes, did you say you were a scuba diver? And I said, oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And she goes, but are you a scuba diving instructor? And I said, well, no, I'm not. And she goes, okay, I need you to cool down. What I recommend is that you cool down, you go and get certified as a scuba diving instructor, because on most of these islands, they don't have instructor level training. And most resorts want instructors to teach dive classes to their tourists. So if you had an instructor's license, you could pretty much live on any tropical island you wanted. Bing, the light bulb goes on. And Mandy said, I could hire people to do any of those other jobs locally. But if you're an instructor, you've got a passport in. And so I cooled down. I didn't have much money. I just had this dream that was eating me up. And so I started saving, and I took some dive classes, and I sold off some furniture, and I got some dive equipment, and I went through these classes for about 9 months, and then all of a sudden, my diving, as I'm getting through this instructor training, I'm about to the end of it, I get certified. My instructors say, hey, why don't you come with us to New Orleans to this 5-day scuba diver convention? And so I say, okay. And I made up these little cards, that I was a scuba diving instructor. And so my vision, and it's always this way, my vision was much smaller than what actually happened. As I was pursuing this dream, my vision was to go to Cozumel or Cayman and go to a hotel and, teach diving, chase women, and drink beer. All right. This was the pinnacle of when I extrapolated the vision all the way out. That's where I came to, working at a hotel as a dive instructor. And so I go to this convention, I talk to all the people in the Caribbean, and nobody hires me in that section of the convention hall. I talk to Cayman and Jamaica and Mexico and all these different countries that are represented with these resorts and dive ships and all this stuff, and then nothing's happening, so I wander into the different parts of the convention hall, and I've got I go to Madagascar. They've got hotels and dive ships there, and out in the Seychelles Islands, La Reunion and Mauritius, which are in the middle of the Indian Ocean. That was an exotic place I wanted to go. And finally I come across this couple at a booth from Ecuador. They're from Quito, Ecuador. This elegant couple named Eduardo and Dolores, and they have a dive operation in the Galapagos Islands. And frankly, in 1993, when this was, I I had heard of the Galapagos Islands, but I couldn't point to it on a map. I'd heard about Charles Darwin and the turtles and all that, but I didn't know where it was. I didn't know anything about it, and it didn't sound appealing to me. And so, but they were really polite, and I spoke some Spanish, which they liked, and I was a dive instructor, which they needed, and I also taught first aid. I'd gotten a couple of classes in first aid and being an oxygen provider, and so I had preparation for it. As I formed this dream, I was getting prepared. I was planning on something happening, and so I was investing my time and money and trying to make this happen. And then they said, well, look, we need somebody like you. And I was like, yeah, well, maybe that could happen. And I wasn't committed to it. They sent me to a little conference, a little mini conference, a little talk on the Galapagos Islands that was being done by a company I was trying to get a job with called the Aggressor Fleet, which is a whole fleet of top-end dive ships all over the planet. Now, this would be a cool platform to, launch all sorts of expeditions. And so I went to this Aggressor Fleet talk on the Galapagos, and they showed me a film. And I remember just getting the chills. It was so cool. And all the enormous marine life you could see out there, whales and sharks and manta rays and all kinds of stuff. And by the time they ended that film, I didn't even wait for the talk to be over. I ran out of there and ran back into the convention hall, and I talked to Eduardo and Dolores, and they basically hired me on the spot. And they invited me to breakfast the next morning. We had a long talk, and it was a little touch and go actually getting hired, but it took about two or 3 months to finally get on board with them, but it happened. And the next thing you know, I'm living in the Galapagos Islands, taking people. They had 9 tourist yachts out there that were the coolest things, and I got to travel on all of them, made all kinds of high-end people, and see, I know all 30,000 square miles of the Galapagos Islands, and my island dream came through in spades, bigger than I ever imagined it would. And I got to know a part of the world. It's what introduced me to South America, which later made me comfortable to take my family down to Peru and be missionaries for 4 years. And one thing leads to another, but where it starts is in that vision and slogging through the mud of that dream, until something happened. Rubbing the two sticks together, is not easy. I've done this, your hands hurt, and there's a lot of friction, and there's smoke before there's fire, and then bang. All of a sudden there's flame, and then you step back and you're starting to put sticks on that fire, and you're not working so hard anymore. The vision is working for you. And it's like pushing a car. When you're pushing a car in neutral, it's, not working. It's really hard at first, and you got to exert a tremendous amount of effort, and finally the thing gets rolling a little bit, and pretty soon you're jogging along beside the car, and the next thing you know, if you get a little incline going, hell, you got to get in there and apply the brakes, just control it. You get the snowball rolling, man. You never know where it's going to go. So anyway, that's kind of my rant for today. It's what's your litmus test for the dream? Don't ring the bell, and follow the dream. Go looking, pursue it, pursue the feeling. It's more of a feeling in the beginning, isn't it? You get a thought in your mind. You think, wow, my God, that would be so much fun, and I want my life to be like that. But how can it be? Because I've got all these things going on. It's quite impossible. So I should go back to reality. I should, do what's logical and practical, and, what people tell me that I can do. What you should do, in my opinion, and certainly the way I roll, is, not just, trash everything that's going on, but begin to take steps, and every day you take a step toward that dream. You go to bed at night and with a little smile, and you say, wow, I got a little closer, and so I encourage you. I love you, and I'm committed to trying to raise the vibration any way I can, and I encourage you to commence, if you're not already, on a meditation practice. It tends to loosen that left brain logical grip and make the right brain intuitive, that gut feeling, that feminine intuition to rise, and not that male logical dominant no, only practical impossible things are you know what I'm saying. Have some balance. We got to have both sides, not just one. And for hundreds of years, really, there has been an attack on the right brain intuitive. The intuitives have always been shoved into the corner, oftentimes chased down and killed, or thrown in the dungeon. All the the wise women who were the people in the village who knew about plants, who were the midwives, or the folks that you come to when you got a problem. The people with this strong intuition. The establishment never liked them, and guess what? They still don't. All right, because they throw a wrench in the works of that authority, and so whatever you can do to balance that brain and bring up that higher vibration and follow the intuition, that's the way I roll, baby. And it's getting easier as I practice this exercise, this mental gym that I come to every day now. This is the 25th hour that I've been doing this, and it's getting easier. It's getting a little easier. I'm not exactly trotting beside the car yet. It's still effort for me just to get out of bed and turn this thing on and talk, to whoever will listen. But you know what? It looks like more people are listening. I can't really read the names on the side. I see several people. My brother Eddie. Hey, you want to see a picture of my brother Eddie and his sweet wife Roxana? There they are, right there. Huh? Here's my brother Eddie. I love you, Eddie and Roxy. He's a great inspiration to me. Anyway, I love you guys. Have a wonderful day, and keep that